Over the last 10 years, The Last of Us has only continued to grow in popularity. After making an outstanding debut with one of the greatest games ever made, The Last of Us returned 7 years later with another entry which is a little bit mixed. And with HBO's The Last of Us bringing in even more fans, the franchise has really never been better. All that's needed now is The Last of Us Part 3. Druckmann has played his cards very close to his chest. With the recent success of HBO's The Last of Us, questions about a hypothetical Last of Us Part 3 have naturally resurfaced, and according to Druckmann's latest statements, while Naughty Dog is open to developing the sequel, it isn't currently in active development. But according to some recent leaks, that might not be entirely true. Officially, Naughty Dog's next game is a Last of Us multiplayer title, not a proper Last of Us Part 3. Not much has been shown of Naughty Dog's Last of Us multiplayer game, but it's expected to be a live service title set in San Francisco. The Naughty Dog game to follow the Last of Us multiplayer project has been rumored to be an original IP, but it seems like there's a good chance it will be The Last of Us Part 3 instead. Over the weekend, a new set of The Last of Us Part 3 leaks appeared online. Posted on the leaker's Patreon, Daniel RPK made several big claims about The Last of Us Part 3's alleged story and cast of characters. According to Daniel RPK, The Last of Us Part 3 will focus on a completely new group of survivors for at least part of its story. The group of 5 scavengers will reportedly be based in an old Victorian house on the outskirts of a devastated city. Daniel RPK also went into some detail about these supposed new characters. The first new character is Lucas, a friendly and kind-mannered survivor that will apparently end up turning a little darker throughout the game after he develops a relationship with another young scavenger in the group. Val will apparently be the leader of the house, though Ezra seeks to take control for himself. Mason is a former soldier, though the leak doesn't specify which military faction he belonged to, such as Fedra or the WLF. Mason is torn between his loyalty to Ezra and what he believes to be best for the house as a whole. The final character mentioned in the leak is Gracie, with only her age of 18 to 25 being noted. While that was the end of Daniel RPK's leak, fellow leaker Viewer Anon took to Twitter to claim that this was true. Viewer Anon also claimed that Ellie will be returning in The Last of Us Part 3, stating that she will be as important as she was in The Last of Us Part 2. Later on in the same thread, Viewer Anon also mentioned that major filming for the game is happening this year, referring to the title's alleged motion capture process. Though the motion capture process can vary wildly between different studios and projects. It's often the case that the motion capture stage is completed fairly on in development for something as narrative-driven as The Last of Us. So, if these rumors are true, then The Last of Us Part 3 could still be quite a ways off. Viewer Anon isn't the only person leaking information about The Last of Us 3. Daniel Rickman has also supposedly leaked fresh details about the game, though fans should take all these leaks with a grain of salt. According to Rickman, as reported by Eurogamer, The Last of Us 3 will feature a Victorian house where some survivors are living together. Specific characters mentioned in this particular report include newcomers named Lucas, Mason, Ezra, Val, and Gracies. Val is apparently the leader of the group, which puts her in conflict with Ezra, who wants to take over. Unfortunately, Last of Us fans will likely have to wait years to find out if there's any truth to the recent claims being made about the game. Naughty Dog is working on a single-player game, and if it is The Last of Us 3 as rumored, more information should come to light a couple of years down the road or so. Speaking of game development, The Last of Us Part 2 and Horizon Forbidden West were both north of $200 million in development costs for Sony. The details from PlayStation were shared in documentation during the FTC vs. Microsoft hearing. Naughty Dog's The Last of Us Part 2 was created at $220 million with nearly 200 staffers. Meanwhile, Guerrilla Games' Horizon Forbidden West cost Sony $212 million with 300 employees on the project. Recently, we also learned that God of War Ragnarok's development budget was above the same $200 million mark. In comparison, God of War 3 took them $46 million to make. As game development costs rises, gamers need to support them in larger numbers now to ensure sequels and new IPs. Diablo 4 has revealed the season of the Malignant as the game's first season, bringing with it new legendary aspects, uniques, and a brand new mechanic inspired by a feature from Reaper of Souls on July 20th. With Diablo Immortal officially announcing the new Blood Knight class, Blizzard shifted focus towards Diablo 4 in the latest developer livestream, confirming the release date, theme, and content coming in the first season of Diablo 4. Season of the Malignant is slated to launch on July 20th, and Diablo 4 players will be able to enjoy a hefty seasonal questline, in addition to the new gameplay features coming with it. Called the Season of the Malignant, Diablo 4's first season introduces a major new gameplay mechanic via malignant enemies and their hearts, which grant game-breaking new powers when slotted in jewelry, plus new quality of life updates, aspects, legendaries, and uniques. The story begins after the events of Diablo 4, when a new threat begins to emerge throughout Sanctuary. This malignance affects practically all living things, turning them into bloodthirsty, mindless foes, and a new character called Cormand has taken it upon himself to figure out its cause. A former priest for the Cathedral of Light, Cormand seeks our help to destroy its source once and for all. In Diablo 4 Season 1, malignant enemies can randomly spawn instead of regular elites throughout all of Sanctuary. These empowered enemies will drop a malignant heart upon defeat. When players use a cage of binding on that malignant heart, a stronger version of that elite will spawn alongside a horde of empowered enemies. By defeating this more challenging foe and its minions, players will earn caged hearts, a powerful new type of equipable item that grants incredible new abilities. Caged hearts work almost like gems, but players can only socket them into jewelry, amulets and rings. However, these hearts will grant much more than a minor stat boost. Each caged heart grants a unique power when socketed into an infested, colored socket, greatly increasing players' strength and build variety compared to the vanilla game. There are 32 new malignant powers, which essentially work like legendary-like abilities that devs described as stupidly powerful, but hopefully balanced. There are 3 different color sockets associated with categories of these new powers, but 4 different types of malignant hearts: blue, red, yellow, and colorless. All rings and jewelry found in Season 1 will roll with infested sockets in one of the 3 colors, including jewelry from vendors. Blue, red, and yellow gems fit into their appropriate socket, while colorless ones will fit anywhere, but are much rarer. Once socketed, caged hearts cannot be removed from infested sockets without destroying them. Caged hearts that drop early with low stats are still useful later on because they can be deconstructed into new materials used to craft invokers. These invokers are used to target certain hearts over others at the end of Malignant Tunnels, a new set of dungeons coming to Diablo 4. As players continue to get stronger and access higher world tiers, better Malignant hearts will naturally drop. However, this new Season 1 Diablo 4 mechanic only begins once players have finished the campaign on at least one character on their account. Malignant Tunnels are a new type of dungeon coming to Diablo 4 with Season of the Malignant. These Malignant Tunnels have a much higher chance to spawn Malignant-type enemies, and will always end with a choice. End-of-tunnel Malignant outgrowths are associated with one of the 4 colors and require a crafted invoker to activate. When an invoker is used on one of these colored outgrowths, an elite boss of the chosen color will spawn from the outgrowth, granting a higher chance for that color of caged heart to drop upon defeat. There's always a choice at the end, and players will be able to target farm different Malignant tunnels for specific heart colors they need. Throughout the rest of a Malignant tunnel, other elites have a higher chance to have the Malignant modifier, too, making these great areas to farm for new Diablo 4 Season 1 items after the campaign is finished. Though not all renown will carry over, renown earned from Altars of Lilith and discovering the map will be shared across all characters across all seasons and the Eternal Realm. Areas of the map that have already been revealed on one character will remain revealed on others, granting 5 renown apiece. Altars of Lilith will remain collected, too, granting 10 renown apiece. Essentially, players who finish the map and Altars of Lilith on one character will begin with each zone at about 2 out of 5 renown completion on new characters, alongside 5 extra potion charges and skill points at level 1. Additionally, there will be a new way for players to completely reset their character's stats, for free. To get a Scroll of Amnesia, players need to complete chapters of the seasonal journey, as they are rewarded for finishing steps of this season-long experience. It can only be used once, and they are relatively hard to come by, but the Scroll of Amnesia provides a much-needed, easy way to respec Paragon points and skill points with the press of a button. A huge discussion in the Diablo 4 community is how the game will implement the seasonal journey, which is standard for most ARPGs, alongside a battle pass, a new feature for Diablo. New details about both were finally revealed in the July 6 developer stream. Though there are rewards that increase player power in the seasonal journey and free battle pass, Blizzard appears to have kept its promise of keeping all premium battle pass rewards cosmetic only. Season Journey is a series of challenges that players can complete throughout Season of the Malignant to earn unique rewards. This is free for all players, and is made up of 7 total chapters. These chapters contain a set of progressively more challenging objectives, like killing world bosses, engaging in PvP, completing a certain number of dungeons, and more. Players only need to progress a subset of these challenges to finish each chapter, after which the next chapter, and a new, harder set of challenges, unlocks. By completing seasonal journey objectives and chapters, players earn favor, which in turn levels up both the free and premium battle passes. They can also unlock new, unique aspects for the Codex, which cannot be earned anywhere else in the game. These are available to all Diablo 4 players, with or without the Premium Pass. The Battle Pass will only progress on seasonal realms, and playing in the Eternal Realm doesn't count towards the seasonal journey or Battle Pass. Though the free Battle Pass does contain some items that grant power, through the use of ashes which grant seasonal bonuses, the Premium Battle Pass will only reward cosmetics like new clothes, new mount armors, and titles. The new Season 1 weapon transmogs will be exclusive to classes, while all other cosmetics in the Battle Pass can be worn by all classes. Smoldering ashes are earned at certain points on the free Battle Pass, and they can be used to improve seasonal bonuses. These seasonal bonuses are active on all seasonal characters, and include permanent bonuses to XP gain, gold, materials, elixir duration, and malignant heart drop chance. The system is limited by level. In fact, the first ashes can only be spent at level 40, so it's not something players can do from the get-go. The seasonal journey and free battle pass are, of course, free for all players to engage with. The premium battle pass will set players back $10 and $25 to skip 20 tiers. The deluxe and ultimate editions grant the premium battle pass for Season 1 to players automatically. Players have been looking forward to Season 1 of Diablo 4 for what feels like years, but it's really only been about 5 weeks. At the end of the cinematic trailer for Season of the Malignant, the release date for the first Diablo 4 season was revealed as July 20, 2023. According to the countdown, it will launch at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time on the 20th. The patch will release on July 18th, though players can't create new seasonal characters until the 20th. Interestingly, according to the developer stream, the basic gameplay changes will go live on the Eternal Realm on July 18th. This includes basic QOL updates and the addition of new legendaries and uniques, though the seasonal malignance mechanic and the meat of Diablo 4 Season 1 will unlock 2 days later. Many newcomers to the Diablo franchise have been confused about how Diablo 4 requires a new character every season. While some don't like this approach, this is in line with previous Diablo games and is also how most other games in the genre work. Others have been unsure about what exactly carries over in each season. Those that want to make sure they get the most renowned progress carried over from the base game to Season 1 and future seasons will want to make sure they log in with their character that has the most progress first. This was explained during the recent Diablo 4 developer update stream. By logging in with the character that has the most progress before starting a new character for Diablo 4 Season 1, players can ensure that things carry over properly. This will apply to existing characters as well. Players can start triggering this before Season 1 even starts, as long as they log in after the planned July 18th update. There's been some confusion in the community, leading some people to think that if they log into one of their Diablo 4 alternate characters before logging in with their main character that they will lose out on that progress. However, that's not the case. It's just important for players to remember to log in with their existing characters at some point after the July 18th update if they want to avoid hunting down all the altars of Lilith again with their Season 1 character. Diablo 4 Season 1 will be an interesting test for the popular action RPG. Diablo 4 is kicking off its post-launch content with Season of the Malignant, but there is a very good chance that players already know when to expect Season 2. During the Diablo 4 livestream where Season of the Malignant made its debut, keen-eyed players noticed countdowns on some of the images shared by the developers. One image indicated 98 days, while the other indicated 102 days. If the dates are meant to be viewed at the start of Season 1, then the launch of Season 2 would correspond to October 26, 2023. The biggest source of evidence to support this date was unveiled by Blizzard on July 11th, as the new gameplay guides video showed the official end date for Season 1 being October 9th. Blizzard had already stated that a Diablo 4 season is meant to last at least 3 months, and having a pause of 2 weeks in between would line up to the seasonal rotation present in Reaper of Souls. That being said, an alternate date for Season 2 could be October 12th, if the images from the developer livestream are meant to be taken literally. The new patch rolls out on July 18th, but Season of the Malignant in Diablo 4 only starts 2 days after, which implies that an October 12th launch for Season 2 is very much possible. Blizzard has confirmed that Diablo 4 hardcore players will potentially have to rediscover the map and reclaim all the altars of Lilith if their character dies before Season 1 starts on July 20th. Diablo 4's hardcore mode features permadeath, so if one has a hardcore character that has all the altars of Lilith and the entire map unlocked, they will want to make sure that they stay alive until after the July 18th update. If their hardcore character dies between now and then, they will be out of luck and will effectively be starting Season 1 from scratch. While one could argue that Diablo 4 players know the risks when they start up a hardcore character, it's safe to say that many would have assumed that renown credit for the map and altars of Lilith would be tied to their account. For some, it may be safest to just not play their Diablo 4 hardcore character again until after the July 18th update drops so they can get the credit they deserve for the tasks they've already completed in the game. There's been a lot of confusion surrounding Diablo 4 Season 1. The game has attracted many newcomers to the franchise who are unfamiliar with how its seasonal content works. Like in past Diablo games, Diablo 4 has players make a new character for each season. While this was expected by hardcore Diablo fans, newcomers have expressed frustration at this revelation. The good news is that after Diablo 4 Season 1 starts, players shouldn't have to stress anymore about making sure that their renown progress is carrying over. Future Diablo 4 seasons should be smoother sailing, to say the least. The game has been a massive hit so far, but as a live service title, it will need to ensure that there is a steady stream of quality new content to keep fans engaged for the long term. Hopefully Diablo 4's seasonal content is worthwhile enough to keep fans playing while they wait for the 2 big DLC expansions that are in active development for the acclaimed game. EA has announced that a single-player Black Panther game is currently in development. In recent years, Marvel has seen notable success in gaming, and Black Panther could very well continue the hot streak. When it comes to character-focused Marvel titles, few games have been half as successful as Marvel's Spider-Man from Insomniac Games. Unsurprisingly, with more single-player titles on the way, expectations are now likely high for Marvel fans. Although, it would be interesting to see how EA will fare, especially given the publisher's general multi-platform approach. Issuing a statement, EA announced that a single-player third-person Black Panther game is on the way, one that is taken up by its recently established Seattle-based studio, Cliffhanger Games. Additionally, the project will be headed by Kevin Stevens, former studio head at Monolith Productions. Confirming previous speculation that an open-world Black Panther game was in development by EA, Stevens mentions that the studio is dedicated to delivering fans a definitive and authentic Black Panther experience, and that the idea is to give players more agency and control over their narrative than they have ever experienced in a story-driven video game. Unfortunately, details on when the game will likely debut or what platforms it will show up on are yet to be shared by EA. However, it should be noted that Black Panther isn't the only Marvel project EA has under its belt. Last year, EA and Marvel signed an agreement over 3 games which included Iron Man and now, Black Panther. While Cliffhanger Games take on the Wakanda-based character, EA Motive will be working on the upcoming Iron Man game. But much like Black Panther, not much is known about what to expect from the Iron Man title other than the studio's confirmation that development on the project has already begun. Apart from those 2 titles, EA also has another unannounced Marvel project in the works. Although rumors suggest that the publisher might not have finalized what that third Marvel project will be yet. Of course, it will be a few years until Black Panther or Iron Man will become publicly available. First unveiled back in September of last year during the D23 Expo, Skydance's Marvel game is still shrouded in mystery, though its debut trailer does give fans a few big hints as to what the game will be about. Skydance's Marvel game seems to be set during World War II, with the main antagonistic force being Hydra. Players will take control of 4 characters during the course of the game, including Captain America, Black Panther, Gabriel Jones of the Howling Commandos, and Nanali of the Wakandan Spy Network. With Uncharted's Amy Hennig at the helm, it seems likely that this game will have a strong narrative focus, and will be a single-player action-adventure game. One of the biggest differences already shown between Skydance and EA's Marvel games is their playable characters. While EA's Black Panther game will likely just revolve around the titular hero, Skydance's game has the aforementioned 4 playable characters at its disposal, with the game switching between them throughout its duration. EA and Skydance's games also have quite different settings. EA's Black Panther game will reportedly focus entirely on Wakanda, potentially giving players an open-world sandbox to explore, if the wording in the initial press release is anything to go by. Skydance's Marvel game, on the other hand, will apparently be a globe-trotting adventure, likely starting players in Wakanda and quickly moving its characters onto the rest of the world. Another big difference between the two games is the Black Panther themselves. Skydance's Black Panther will be Azuri, T'Challa's grandfather, and though the identity of EA's Black Panther hasn't been confirmed yet, it's likely to be T'Challa, or potentially Shuri. To stand out from one another, all these games need to do is double down on these elements that already make them unique. Skydance should ensure that its Marvel game really focuses on its multiple playable characters and its unique WW2 setting, while EA and Cliffhanger games should focus on Black Panther's specific motivations and abilities, as well as Wakanda as an open-world setting. Achieving this should make the two Black Panther games look and feel completely different. Thankfully, fans don't have to wait that long for the next big Marvel game, as Insomniac's Spider-Man 2 is set to launch on October 20th with a follow-up in the shape of Marvel's Wolverine, rumored for a late 2024 release. Either way, the next few years are shaping up to be a promising time to be a Marvel fan on the gaming side. Insomniac waited quite a while before it mentioned anything more about Marvel's Spider-Man 2, but now that it has revealed 10 minutes of gameplay footage and its two main villains fully, at least from what fans have been shown, it is in the midst of a full-blown marketing campaign. New details aren't being shared frequently, but its appearance at Summer Game Fest and the Game Awards 10-year concert were a treat for fans. Now, the next place Marvel's Spider-Man 2 is officially scheduled to appear is none other than a Marvel panel at San Diego Comic-Con 2023 later this month. Marvel's Spider-Man 2 will have its own panel at Hall H on Thursday, July 20th, when fans can hear more about the game in a presentation dubbed Symbiotic Relationships. It is known that actors from the game will appear, but not which, and no further details have been shared since. Either way, Marvel's Spider-Man 2 being there at all is huge news, considering how prominent Marvel's Spider-Man's presence was at SDCC way back in 2018 before the original installment was released. Marvel Spider-Man made its presence known at SDCC 2018 by sharing several massive details, including its entire opening cinematic. This would have given fans a clear look at Peter Parker's apartment and all the Easter eggs it has littered throughout. If that's anything to go off from, Marvel's Spider-Man 2 could reveal its own opening cutscene at SDCC 2023. There's no telling what that could entail and how soon after Marvel's Spider-Man Miles Morales it picks up the narrative. But based on the sequel's newly showcased concept art, it is learned that Peter Parker and the Osborns have seemingly created a charity fundraiser of some sort called the Emily May Foundation, which would point to potential research into medicine inspired by the deaths of Emily Osborn and May Parker. Marvel Spider-Man also revealed Audie Granov's Velocity suit at SDCC 2018, as well as a PS4 Pro bundle, which came with a cherry red PS4 Pro emblazoned with the game's iconic white spider insignia and a red and white controller. Because Marvel Spider-Man 2 will have its own abundance of suit skins, it is plausible that a new suit could be unveiled at SDCC 2023, even though a copious number of suits have already been at least partially revealed as part of the sequel's pre-order bonuses and digital deluxe and collector's editions. Likewise, with Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse having recently been released in theaters, it is now nearly inevitable that at least one inspired suit will appear in Marvel's Spider-Man 2. Having a themed Marvel Spider-Man 2 controller would also not be out of the question, though an appropriately themed PS5 console being packaged with it in a bundle might be. That is not all, however. Marvel Spider-Man's SDCC 2018 story trailer put a ton of emphasis on the game's known villains at the time, making it look like the narrative would revolve wholly around Spider-Man tackling the Sinister Six while Mary Jane Watson precariously investigates Norman Osborn and Silver Sable. These sequences turned out to be much smaller parts of the overall narrative, though they are certainly cinematic and climactic. And if Marvel's Spider-Man 2 has its own cutscene-centric story trailer at SDCC 2023, fans can maybe expect that what is shown there might not be representative of the story's entire picture either. Speaking of Comic-Con, AAA games have a tendency to get announced early nowadays, but Skydance's still untitled Marvel project needs to provide more details soon. Not since Marvel's Avengers has both Captain America and Black Panther been playable in a single game, which is a massive reason why Skydance's Marvel game is as interesting as it is. But even more intriguing is the game's WW2 era setting, which might likely be enmeshed somehow into the game's inevitable title announcement, since it is such a profound and unique distinction for the game. Still, Skydance's Marvel game is without a title, and while it might not be far enough along to confidently share gameplay, there is one event it apparently won't be part of anyhow. San Diego Comic-Con 2023 takes place at the end of the month, and with a huge Marvel presence there will surely be plenty to look forward to. SDCC 2023's briefing confesses that fans can stay tuned for additional information about Marvel Spider-Man 2 and Marvel Snap, but nowhere is Skydance's Marvel game mentioned. It would be possible and understandable if the game was too early in development to show anything of merit besides maybe another tonal teaser, but a Marvel panel would still be a great opportunity for Skydance to share a title or more information about when more details might be released. Indeed, Skydance's Marvel game also neglected to share a desired release window, and even declaring a wide 2024 or 2025 window would be helpful in establishing expectations for when fans can expect to hear more. There is always a chance that it shows up unexpectedly, especially since Marvel Spider-Man 2 and Marvel Snap are well established already with no need for a grand surprise of any kind. That might be rather unlikely though, and with no clear statement of it being there, it is safe to assume it won't be. This would be hugely disappointing since the game was revealed almost a year ago now, and it now seems as if it was revealed far too soon for the public, even if it means that Skydance could start to recruit more employees toward it. Too much was arguably shown for the game as well if it does not intend to share more in the near future, seeing as how a tonal teaser was put together for it to inform fans of when the game is set, but it doesn't have an actual title yet either, which would suggest that it is in initial phases of development. Marvel's Wolverine already has a title and only has its own cinematic tonal teaser to date, though with Marvel Spider-Man from Insomniac as well, it is not a wholly surprising title. That said, EA Motive's Iron Man game technically doesn't have a title, but could easily be called Iron Man or Marvel's Iron Man. Skydance's Marvel game is much more complicated with 4 playable protagonists instead of 1, and the title will need to be representative of that. Either way, Skydance has many opportunities to share more about its Marvel game in the future, but the sooner it does the better it will be for its notability moving forward. Speaking of events, the Tokyo Game Show is set to deliver its largest event this year, according to its organizers. TGS 2023 will take place at its usual venue of Makuhari Mess in Chiba, Japan. But unlike last year, there will be no COVID-19 restrictions in place, so the entire space will be utilized for exhibitors and visitors. Over 2,000 booths and 200,000 visitors are expected. For the first time in 4 years, TGS will take up the entire Makuhari Mess halls for the physical exhibition, the organizer said in a press release. In addition, we will further strengthen the virtual venue and online projects to realize the largest ever hybrid event. Running from September 21st to September 24th, 2023, the theme for this year's show is Games in Motion, the World in Revolution. Exhibitors will include Bandai Namco, Capcom, Sony Interactive Entertainment, Sega, Atlus, Xbox, Bethesda, and Nintendo. Square Enix and Kojima Productions will also be in attendance. As restrictions have been lowered this year, TGS 2023 will focus even more on attracting exhibitors from overseas and inviting visitors to the physical venue. Specifically, the business meeting area will be expanded on business days to accommodate face-to-face international business negotiations, the organizer said. General admission for Japanese residents are on sale from July 8th. International residents will be able to purchase tickets from July 26th. Last year, TGS returned as a physical event for the first time since the pandemic. A limited number of tickets were sold during TGS 2022, and younger visitors were excluded. According to VGC, and Japan was not fully open to international visitors at the time. Despite the cancellation of E3 this year, which was due to be organized by GamesIndustry.biz's parent company ReedPop. Plenty of major games shows have returned to hosting physical events like Summer Game Fest and GDC 2023. The creative director of Beyond Good and Evil 2, Emile Morel, has passed away at the age of 40, leaving behind a legacy of beloved Ubisoft classics and more. A Ubisoft game designer with a particularly long and storied tenure, Morel worked on Rayman Legends, among numerous other titles, which is often considered to be one of the finest side-scrolling platforming titles of all time. Beyond Good and Evil 2 has had a long and troubled development period, with Morel only taking over the project earlier in 2023. While this meant that he didn't have the opportunity to see the project through before passing, his team members have highlighted that Morel did leave a lasting impression and appears to have been happy with the game's progress. Though some feel that the ship has sailed for Beyond Good and Evil 2, this doesn't seem to be the case internally at Ubisoft. According to former Ubisoft narrative director Gabriel Schrager, Morel was proud of the progress made on Beyond Good and Evil 2 and of the more recent Space Monkeys community program, through which fans could sign up to assist with the game's development in some capacity. May it be shipped in his name, said Schrager. The cause of Morel's passing hasn't been publicly announced, but it is known that he was only 40 years old. Ubisoft reiterated earlier this year that Beyond Good and Evil 2 is still in development, even though there hadn't been any major news on that front for some time at that point. The unexpected passing of its creative director will surely slow things down for the rest of the dev team. Ubisoft is yet to comment on Morel's death and what it means for the game's continued production. Morel worked at Ubisoft for over 14 years, starting as a game designer and rising to become creative director of the long-in-development Beyond Good and Evil 2. During his time at Ubisoft Montpellier, he also worked on Rayman Legends and Rayman Fiesta Run. Prior to Ubisoft, he spent almost 4 years working at Eden Games in various game design positions, contributing to titles such as Test Drive Unlimited and Alone in the Dark. Greg Hermitant, who was producer on Beyond Good and Evil 2 for nearly 5 years before working on this year's Valiant Hearts Coming Home, also paid tribute. As one of the biggest contemporary game productions seemingly stuck in development hell, the loss of Beyond Good and Evil 2's second creative director is a huge deal. It's worth remembering that Morel took over from the game's previous creative director, Jean-Marc Geoffroy, earlier in 2023. Geoffroy was taken off the project during a restructuring attempt at the studio, and with development still under wraps, it's unclear how much progress the game has made under Morel's guidance. It's worth pointing out that things seem to have been going better over the past couple of years. Beyond Good and Evil 2 devs expected cancellation back in 2021, but the production persevered and may have even hit its stride after Morel took over. Whether such optimism is displaced or not remains to be seen. Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora and Star Wars Outlaws need to hit big for Ubisoft to go even bigger on single-player games, especially Beyond Good and Evil 2 moving forward. Speaking of Ubisoft, a leak of the source code from Crytek and Ubisoft's original Far Cry title that launched the hit shooter franchise is surprising fans more than 19 years after its initial release. The game that started everything, Far Cry, is still ranked as one of the best by many fans and just a prototype of what was to come by others. Far Cry is one of the most well-known FPS franchises in the video game industry today. It doesn't quite have the consistent output of competitors like Call of Duty or Battlefield, but the focus on single-player, open-world experiences in a diverse range of action-packed environments keeps its fan base loyal and adamant to this day. The franchise has reached extreme heights in popularity, with the sequels to the original, the second and third entries, in particular, being considered game-changing by gamers. But the original still has its appreciators, which has never been more apparent than with this latest surprising leak. Far Cry communities were recently shocked by the unexpected leak of the source code from the original game. It's currently available for download on Internet Archive and already has many PC modders salivating at the possibilities. It's unknown right now exactly who uploaded the source code or why it's just hitting the internet right now, more than 19 years after the game's initial PC launch in March 2004. Many fans are definitely excited about what this could mean for potential mods of the original Far Cry moving forward, though. It's unknown how long this code may remain on Internet Archive, considering the site has had copyright problems in the past. For the average player, the source of a game being made available isn't necessarily something to jump on. It can mean a lot for modders, speedrunners, and video game designers, though. All of those aforementioned groups can study the game in a way that wasn't possible before, which could lead to some pretty interesting developments in the future. It'd be interesting to see a more dedicated speedrunning group grow out of this leak, considering the original Far Cry title has fallen into relative obscurity when standing next to the massive titles that are the rest of the franchise entries. There are already thousands of mods for some of the more popular Far Cry games. The game file was uploaded to archive.org. From my educated guess, this is some source tree leak for the PC version of the game to add support for the Ubisoft game launcher and DRM, said one commenter on archive.org. Although the code does not include all of the title's patches, users said that someone could get a debugged PC version of the game running on their hardware. Regarding game leaks, back in January, Riot Games' League of Legends source code was exposed in a cyber attack. It's worth noting that this source code was released by an unknown entity and was not made publicly available by Ubisoft or Crytek. The code is still fully copyrighted and nothing can be done with it for profit. Hopefully, there will be some news at some point in the future about why this leak came when it did. Maybe this will also motivate Ubisoft and Crytek to give much-needed remakes of the original 2 Far Cry titles to buff out some of the dated edges. Evan Wells, the co-president of Naughty Dog and executive producer of The Last of Us on HBO, has just announced his departure from the studio where he has spent most of his career. Wells has been with the studio since the late 1990s and has been a part of numerous major games and series. His credits include Crash Bandicoot Warped, the Jak and Daxter series, the Uncharted series, and the Last of Us series. Wells originally joined Naughty Dog as a lead designer, eventually being promoted to co-president in 2004. Under his leadership, the studio has released some of its most successful titles, most recently The Last of Us Part 2. Prior to joining the team, Wells worked with Sega as a lead tester, programmer, and lead designer. His first project at Naughty Dog was developing Crash Bandicoot 3 Warped. Wells became co-president of Naughty Dog in 2005 alongside Stephen White. The following year, White was replaced by Christoph Balestra, with the pair overseeing the release of Uncharted and The Last of Us. Last year, Wells also got into TV and film production, serving as an executive director for the Uncharted movie and HBO's new series based on The Last of Us. Season 1 of The Last of Us set a new bar for video game adaptations and earned its creators, including Wells, plenty of praise. Now, after a long and successful career, he's announced his retirement from Naughty Dog. In a statement released by Naughty Dog on July 11th, Wells revealed that he will be stepping away at the end of this year. In his open letter, Wells reflected on his career and thanked his colleagues and friends at the studio for all their hard work and support. He also expressed confidence in the studio and his Naughty Dog co-president Neil Druckmann, who will soon be leading the studio on his own. Druckmann was promoted to co-president of Naughty Dog in 2020, following his tenure as vice president. The tone of Wells' letter was bittersweet, expressing both sadness at the end of an era but also excitement and optimism for the future. The announcement gave no specific date for his departure or an indication of his future plans, but he did state that he's looking forward to seeing what the studio will accomplish after he's gone. While Wells explained that he'd been discussing this decision with his co-president and other studio leadership for some time, the decision is likely to come as a surprise to many fans and industry observers. With a new The Last of Us 3 rumored to be in development, a sci-fi game that may be happening, and a new season of the HBO series planned for the future, Wells will be stepping away from lots of big projects. There's currently no indication if or how this departure will impact the company's leadership or future Naughty Dog projects recently teased by Druckmann. For now, it seems Wells will continue in his current role for at least a few months. After that, if no other changes are made, Neil Druckmann will become the sole head of the studio. Druckmann also has a long list of accomplishments and years of experience with Naughty Dog, so fans have reason to hope that the studio will be in good hands during and after the coming transition, with some skepticism. Capcom has given Resident Evil fans new hope that Resident Evil Code Veronica could be getting a remake at some point down the line. Even though it's not a numbered entry in the long-running survival horror franchise, Resident Evil Code Veronica is an extremely important game story-wise, and was developed as the true successor to Resident Evil 2. Despite this, Capcom has seemingly skipped over Code Veronica in its line of Resident Evil remakes. The first Resident Evil remake came in 2002 when Capcom remade the original Resident Evil from the ground up with significantly enhanced graphics and new gameplay features. In which this one is my favorite Resident Evil and one of my favorites of all time. The Spencer Mansion is just legendary. Nearly 2 decades later, Capcom moved forward with a highly successful remake of Resident Evil 2, which spawned remakes of Resident Evil 3 and Resident Evil 4. Chronologically, Code Veronica takes place before Resident Evil 4, which is why some fans of the franchise were disappointed when the RE4 remake was announced before a Code Veronica remake. While Capcom still won't commit to the possibility of remaking Code Veronica, it seems as though the company hasn't ruled it out. Capcom was recently asked by a shareholder about only doing remakes for the numbered entries in the series. Capcom responded with a vague answer that it is carrying out discussions regarding the future expansion of this series so it can be enjoyed by a wide audience. This is far from a confirmation that a Code Veronica remake is in development, but it also means that Capcom is at least open to the possibility, giving Resident Evil fans new hope that it will happen at some point down the line. If Capcom does decide to produce a full-blown Code Veronica remake, such a project is likely years away. According to the latest rumors, the next Resident Evil game is Resident Evil 9 and after that it is Resident Evil Revelations 3 Outrage, not a remake. This is good news for Resident Evil fans who prefer completely original adventures to remakes, but it's bad news for those wanting to relive Code Veronica with improved graphics and modern quality of life features. Some fans think that Capcom will continue ignoring Code Veronica with its remakes and instead jump to a Resident Evil 5 remake next. This would make some sense as the Resident Evil 5 story follows up on some loose Wesker threads left by RE4, but it would be a shame as Code Veronica is the game that brought Wesker back to begin with. While a Code Veronica remake may or may not ever happen, at least the game is playable on modern platforms. I welcome both RE5 and Code Veronica remake. Capcom is mulling over ideas about what it wants to do with one of its most popular franchises. So far, 2023 has been an exciting year for the Japanese video game giant with some big releases like Resident Evil 4, Street Fighter 6, and upcoming third-person dinosaur shooter Exoprimal. Capcom also announced some new games during its recent showcase, including Apollo Justice Ace Attorney Trilogy and a new action-adventure title called Kunitsugami Path of the Goddess. As one of the oldest independent video game developers in the world, Capcom has some of the most coveted well-regarded franchises in its stable. Some of its early success stories are the notoriously difficult Ghosts and Goblins and the side-scrolling beat-em-up Final Fight which launched in 1985 and 1989 respectively as arcade titles. Capcom has been fairly successful throughout its history thanks in no small part to its hugely popular Resident Evil, Monster Hunter and Street Fighter and its efforts to remain competitive in the home console space. Capcom is carefully considering how to approach future games in the Mega Man franchise which received its first entry in 1987 and has spawned dozens of sequels, follow-ups, and spin-offs collectively across several console generations. Discussing the historic franchise in a Q&A session with its shareholders, Capcom has said that the Mega Man series is being handled with the utmost care, and that the company is considering multiple factors in developing a solid concept for future entries. Retro compilations of games such as Mega Man Battle Network Legacy Collection were also discussed, with Capcom mentioning that it was also considering how it will approach porting and addressing technical issues. The last entry into the franchise is Mega Man 11 which launched in 2018 and was generally well received. However, some Mega Man fans feel that recent entries lack the creativity when compared to other historic 2D platformers like the Super Mario and Sonic the Hedgehog franchises. Capcom sometimes relegates its more experimental game design elements to newer IP like the upcoming Kunitsugami Path of the Goddess and has seemingly been sheepish about making any wild departures from the core gameplay Mega Man fans have come to know and love. However, some feel that the series needs something fresh for its future entries to truly shine and recapture the magic that has made the franchise so successful. Capcom has been doing some revivals in the recent with a Dead Rising reboot reportedly also in the works, which I covered in my previous video. Also along with these remakes, revivals and new IPs, a Dino Crisis revamp might be possibly on the horizon, in my opinion as a prediction. IO Interactive has opened a studio in the UK to work on its two big projects, Project Fantasy and Project 007. The new team is based in Brighton and there is already a small group of developers in place. IO Interactive CEO Håkan Abrak tells GamesIndustry.biz that this team have worked together before on projects that share some similarities to the games that IO is building. The developer, best known for the Hitman series, also has teams based in Copenhagen, Malmö, Barcelona and Istanbul. We have had this strategy for a while, from before coronavirus times, to meet talent where they are, Abrak explains. But not just hiring freelancers around the world, but opening studios where we think the ideal conditions are there, in terms of an attractive location, with lots of talent and lots of potential. There are over 22 studios in Brighton, and Creative Assembly is just north of it. IO had considered other cities in the UK, before settling on Brighton. The UK and Brighton also complements the firm's upcoming James Bond game, currently titled Project 007. James Bond is a distinctly British brand, and Brighton isn't too far from Pinewood, where the Bond movies are made. Building a team in the UK makes sense, as IO should also be eligible for the country's video games tax breaks, as making a game that is culturally British will help it secure the relief. Abrak says that although they're looking into that now, it wasn't a motivating factor behind coming to the UK. Abrak says having a small team in place to begin with in Brighton is different for IO Interactive, which has had to build its other locations from scratch. In fact, the CEO is only just returning from Istanbul, having spent the best part of the year building the team there. We started from scratch in Malmö, we started almost from scratch in Barcelona, and we started from scratch with Istanbul, he says. There will be some integration work to do, but we will have a flying start in Brighton. We've spent a bit of time talking about Project 007, but actually the current Brighton team is mostly working on the firm's online fantasy RPG Project Fantasy. However, as the team expands, it will begin to work on 007. Abrak explains that opening studios in different locations allows the firm to avoid that feeling of being a factory, and that he aims to keep each of IO's studios to under 150 people. Abrak adds this is also why the company has made it mandatory for staff to be in the office at least 3 days a week. Abrak in April 2021, he told me that IO had grown to over 200 people. Now, just over 2 years later, they're about to surpass 300 people. And there is more to come. We're growing fast, but we're hiring people that we believe in, who believe in us and our way of working. So it's organic growth, but fast organic growth, he concludes. For the development phases we are in right now, and with the move we're making with Brighton, I think we have what we need for the next year or 6 months. And up to and after that period, we will be hiring a bit slower, before we get into the later phases of production. What's the end goal? It's difficult to say, but I think most of the people needed for Project Fantasy and Project 007 are in place. There will be a bit more growing, and it's not hard to imagine that IO will be closer to 400 people in another year or 18 months from now. I'm looking forward to both of them, and hopefully they'll deliver. Voice actor Luke Roberts, who will play James Sunderland in the Silent Hill 2 remake, has seemingly hinted at the long-awaited title's release date. Rumors indicate that the Silent Hill 2 remake is close to completion, but this hint indicates players have a small wait on their hands yet. It's been an incredible few years for fans of horror remakes. Capcom has had an enormous amount of success remaking its iconic Resident Evil franchise, with each title received brilliantly. The hope is that Konami and Bloober team can recreate that same success with Silent Hill 2. While the franchises are certainly different in many ways, there's no denying that there's a significant overlap in player base there. In many ways, Capcom has done the legwork by getting gamers excited about horror again, and teed up the ball for Bloober team perfectly. Now all the studio has to do is hit Silent Hill 2 out of the park. News comes from the video game forum Reset Era, where a user allegedly direct messaged Roberts on Instagram asking when Silent Hill 2 was set to be released. His response was a short but sweet, early next year I believe. Just a few weeks ago, a release date of September 29th leaked for the Silent Hill 2 remake, contradicting Roberts' message here. This release date can be found in the pre-order listing from an Australian retailer, Guerrilla Gaming. First spotted by Comic Book, the listing shows the pre-order price of $89 for the PlayStation 5 version of the game, with the release date right below it. It should be said that this date came from an online website, where placeholder dates are often used in lieu of actual release dates. If the message from Luke Roberts is real, players should be inclined to believe him, as the actor for the game's protagonist should probably have some inkling of when it will release. Despite the date being later than many might have expected, it does make sense. Since the Silent Hill 2 remake was first announced with a trailer in October 2022, there has yet to be any official marketing for the game from Bloober team. If it was to be released this year as many fans had speculated, a greater marketing push would probably have been expected by now. Of course, no two games are the same, and the developer could simply be taking a different approach, but a release this year is becoming increasingly unlikely. It's quite likely they are moving to avoid Spider-Man 2 and Call of Duty, to make space. No matter when the game releases, it's just good to see Silent Hill rise from the dead. The last release in the series was Silent Hill Downpour, which came all the way back in 2012. After nothing came of PT back in 2014, gamers could be forgiven for thinking Silent Hill's hiatus was a permanent one. But with Silent Hill F on the way in the future too, it seems as though Konami is all in on Silent Hill once more. Bloober Team, the game developer behind the upcoming Silent Hill 2 remake and Layers of Fear, has recently confirmed that the studio is now done with psychological horror games, and will focus on mass-market horror in the future. Bloober Team is known for making some of the best psychological horror games out there, so it's a controversial decision for me, to say the least. Last year, it was announced that Bloober Team would remake Silent Hill 2, perhaps the most beloved entry in Konami's horror franchise. Silent Hill 2 was known for its unique take on psychological horror before it was something common, and the game stood out among similar survival horror games of its time due to its unnerving atmosphere and a focus on the protagonist's mental state. Bloober Team seems like a great fit for the remake exactly because of the studio's experience with creating similar horror experiences. Now, Piotr Babieno, the CEO of the studio, revealed in an interview with Engadget that the recent release of the Layers of Fear remake was the swan song of the company's classic style of making games. Babieno described the old style of the game as focusing on story, mood, and vibes, but not giving a lot of attention to the mechanics of the game. Now, the studio will transform into what is known as Bloober Team 3.0 internally, and move towards a more mass-market-oriented horror design, making bigger titles that will have a lot of gameplay mechanics. Babieno also confirmed that the upcoming remake of Konami's horror franchise will be the first time Bloober Team will test out its new philosophy. This could mean that the Silent Hill 2 remake will prioritize gameplay over the vibes, or only that the company is ready to give it more polish and make the gameplay feel better than the other titles it has put out before. While it's impossible to say if this shift in the studio's strategy is bad news for the Silent Hill 2 remake or a good move forward, one developer believes that it'll be hard to develop the game anyway. In a recent interview, Sam Barlow, who worked on the remake of the first title of the franchise, Silent Hill Shattered Memories, said that the Silent Hill 2 remake is a poison chalice. After all, the job of reimagining such a classic horror game won't be easy, and some fans will always be left unsatisfied. My concern with this interview of Bloober Team's transition is the word mass market. Not every game need to appeal to everyone, that's why survival horror, psychological horror and generic zombie shooting genres exist separately. There are some interbreeding with a few titles, but I want more unique games as possible. Not everything needs to be mass market focus, sometimes niche community focus and theme is a good thing for creativity. Bloober Team moving from the psychological roots is a shame. I really liked Layers of Fear, Observer, The Medium and Blair Witch. I hope they realize this and don't stay far off their roots and continue psychological horror. Moving forward, we have some sales updates and numbers from the gaming industry to cover. Monolith Soft, the game development studio behind the Xenoblade Chronicles series, is reporting that its profits have been at an all-time high. This was detailed in a financial report that covered its fiscal year. For those unaware, Monolith Soft is a subsidiary studio under Nintendo, not to be confused with Monolith Productions, a subsidiary of Warner Bros. Interactive Entertainment. The company was acquired by Nintendo in 2006, first producing the Wii-exclusive title Disaster Day of Crisis, before producing the at-the-time cult classic Xenoblade Chronicles, which later became a smash hit that produced a number of sequels to form a franchise. Monolith Soft would then become one of Nintendo's most important studios, providing support to a number of the Nintendo Switch's heavy hitters and most popular games. This includes being a support studio for games like The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, Splatoon 2, and Animal Crossing New Horizons. The developer was also quite busy throughout 2022 as well, not only providing support for one of Nintendo's fall tentpole releases, Splatoon 3, but also developing the third numbered game in the Xenoblade Chronicles trilogy. With both games being a success on the Switch, it's likely no surprise to hear that the company's profits have skyrocketed. This report comes from a Japanese business outlet, gamebiz.jp, which detailed Monolith Soft's 2022 to 2023 fiscal year, ending on March 2023. According to the data provided, Monolith Soft had made around 800 million yen, about $5.63 million in profits, which is a 97.8% increase when compared to the previous year's 404 million yen, $2.84 million. That is approximately double what the developer had made last year, which was likely the result of the successful releases of both Splatoon 3 and Xenoblade Chronicles 3 within the same year. It should be noted that the previous fiscal profit figure was covering 2021 to 2022, which was a year that Monolith Soft didn't release a game nor have a title that was supported by the studio launched during that period. Despite that, the studio made a decent profit at the time, and this figure for 2022 is an incredible jump in profitability. 2023 is looking to be a promising year for Monolith Soft as well, based on the current Nintendo Switch release schedule. In 2023 alone, Monolith Soft has contributed to one of Nintendo's biggest heavy hitters of the year, The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. Not only that, the company's 2023 fiscal year also saw the release of the Xenoblade Chronicles 3 Future Redeemed DLC, which was praised by many fans for concluding the series in an ultimately climactic and satisfying way. This September will see a re-release of one of Monolith Soft's first games before being acquired by Nintendo, Baten Kaitos 1 and 2 HD Remaster. Fans have congratulated Monolith Soft online for this momentous milestone. Despite a 6-year-old lifespan, the Nintendo Switch has set another sales record in Japan for selling the most consoles in June. Breaking a record like this is unheard of for a system as old as the Switch, proving there may still be life in the aging console. When the Nintendo Switch launched in 2017, the system had a sparse lineup of launch titles, with many players picking up The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild and exclusively playing that game for the entire launch year. Fast forward to 2023, and the Nintendo Switch has sold over 120 million units, with Nintendo releasing more than 50 successful exclusives for the system. The success for the hybrid console has been so impressive that the Nintendo Switch even surpassed the PS4 in sales. Not only has Nintendo practically erased the memory of its lackluster Wii U generation, but the Switch is still breaking records today. The Nintendo Switch has set many milestones over the years, and it looks like there's no end in sight for the system's success. According to a recent article on Famitsu, the Nintendo Switch sold 380,000 units in Japan in the month of June. These are the highest figures for June that the system has seen, and it's a 68% increase from the same month in 2022. These are the kind of sales that are common for a console in its first few years of life, not entering its 7th year of production like the Nintendo Switch. Not only did the Switch break the sales record for June in Japan, but the system is also on its way to selling 30 million units, which will make it the country's best-selling console. And with 2 more giant releases, Super Mario RPG and Super Mario Bros. Wonder, releasing later this year, the chances are high that more records will be broken. With all the success that Nintendo has had with its latest console, it may be time for fans to wonder if Nintendo will release the Switch 2 anytime soon. Many fans have been calling for an updated version of the Switch for years now, but with the original console breaking all these records, Nintendo may not release a sequel system until sales slow down. Final Fantasy franchise has passed an impressive sales milestone, reaching 180 million units sold. This recent achievement is another reminder of the popularity the Final Fantasy games have maintained over the years, with many of the installments in the series selling well into the millions of copies, such as the recent release, Final Fantasy XVI. While the success of the Final Fantasy games for Square Enix is no secret, the developer previously revealed back in March 2022 sales data for the franchise, giving a better idea of how massive the series is. Based on this report from the company, the franchise had sold 173 million units. This impressive total was enough to easily make it the most successful of the company's IPs. Final Fantasy franchise had crossed the 180 million units sold threshold. While Final Fantasy has been a success for Square Enix over the past few decades, this latest sales report puts into perspective the enduring popularity of the game series. It is worth noting a lot has happened in the Final Fantasy franchise between the sales figures revealed in this recent announcement and the ones reported in March 2022. Notably, Final Fantasy XVI launched on the PS5 and has sold over 3 million copies. In addition, several remasters of classic games in the series have been released after March 2022. Specifically, Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion, a remaster of the prequel to Final Fantasy VII, and the Nintendo Switch and PS4 versions of Final Fantasy Pixel Remaster. Collection of remasters of some of the first games in the series became available. The sales of these games likely played a part in pushing the franchise past the 180 million unit mark. It will be interesting to see how this number grows over the coming months. Final Fantasy XVI was launched in June, meaning it could sell even more copies on PS5 and potentially come to PC in the months ahead. In addition to the sales of Final Fantasy XVI, Square Enix has more planned for the franchise. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is expected to release in 2024 and is the next game in the Final Fantasy VII Remake project, and multiple Final Fantasy remakes, which I covered in my previous video. With this in mind, it seems inevitable that the series will cross the 200 million unit mark in the next year. We have sales update from Capcom as well, as Monster Hunter Rise has now sold over 13 million units, with Sunbreak achieving more than 6 million units worldwide too. And Street Fighter VI also reached 2 million copies sold worldwide, and Resident Evil Village sold 8 million copies. A study has compared classic games to silent movies by saying that only a low percentage of titles are commercially available. There is a concern that only a certain selection of titles currently exists in the market. Some players cling to their nostalgia through historical means. The NES was very big in the 80s while the Genesis was hot during the early 90s. That's quite a few decades removed from the current date, meaning physical copies of the titles may be hard to find in this day and age. Some of the titles found aren't even available anywhere else, such as NBA Jam. According to the Video Game History Foundation study, only 13% of games made before 2010 are available for legitimate acquisition on any platform. This means that 87% of all video game libraries are critically endangered and could be lost in time if not preserved properly. The attached charts show how many are still available and to which decades the titles belong to. For example, only 5.8% of games across the Game Boy family of handhelds are still available to buy digitally, while on the Commodore 64, just 4.5% of games analyzed are on sale via digital stores. The number of games that are re-released are significantly low, especially games released before 1985, which represent 3% of the current market. While libraries and archives like the Video Game History Foundation and Software Preservation Network can digitally preserve these games, they are restricted from sharing them due to copyright laws. Earlier this year, Nintendo closed its Wii U and 3DS digital storefronts, which was a major blow to the digital availability of games on these consoles. In July 2022, Chris Young, librarian and curator of the Sid Bolton Collection at the University of Toronto, Mississauga, told GamesIndustry.biz that it's going to be a lot harder to preserve games like we'd been used to before now, due to games being constantly updated. Keeping track of the changes to those games over time is pretty much impossible, to a certain degree, he added. Non-AAA titles and third-party releases might not get as much support and could forever disappear. At the moment, only bigger publishers get the luxury of re-releasing games in modern times. Such an example would be Atari and its Atari 50 The Anniversary Collection, which is available on current-gen and previous generation consoles. Atari has had a huge impact on gaming history and can pull off something like this. However, for one-hit wonders, indie developers, and now-defunct companies which have not made a big impact in the industry, it may be harder. The Super Nintendo library is a prime example. The SNES was known for its vast number of great RPGs back in the day, such as Robotrek, or Illusion of Gaia. These titles don't have the support that they had back in the day and are certainly not available for purchase unless fans want to scour thrift shops and used video game stores. It is a harrowing state that less than a fifth of all games to ever exist cannot be found anywhere anymore. Hopefully, the Video Game History Foundation can find a way that benefits gaming historians and the companies which had produced great titles and preserve what is currently available for future generations. For now, game people who loves to revisit those worlds might need to rely on emulation or other means. I play retro games and old classics all the time. It is sad to see that game preservation is more critical now than ever, as the industry moves towards a digital and always online agenda. And that's all for the video, guys. Like and share the video for a greater audience. Comment your thoughts on the topics, and donations are always appreciated. Subscribe to the channel and click the bell icon, and until then from SMPV, it's goodbye.